This is IVP. Hi everyone, my name is Nancy Wang Yun and I'm a sociologist and pop culture expert, and this is a bonus episode of The Disruptors. I am here today with Rebecca Sun, the senior editor of diversity and inclusion at The Hollywood Reporter. She is a fierce advocate for artists of color in Hollywood in her feature articles and an amazing interviewer on stage and camera. In 2019, she was honored as one of Gold House's A100, which is granted to the most impactful Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in culture. She has also received a National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Award. And I'm so excited to be able to talk to her about the upcoming Oscars, what her favorites are. We talk about Drive My Car, one of my favorites. And so just so happy that you're here to join us for this very special episode. Rebecca, what do you think about these nominees? Were there any surprises for you?
Not too many wild surprises. I think that overall this season has felt a little underwhelming with the lack of a clear frontrunner, which generally kind of gives people something to either rally around or rally against. And again, this is the second pandemic award season, and in many cases, this batch of films, they were either delayed. So some of them were made before the pandemic, and some of them during. And I think that it's just, studios kind of maybe are still holding back a little bit because they know that, or because they don't know that their films are going to get the wide theatrical release that they want them to be experienced in. And so you're just getting kind of smaller things, subtler things, quieter things, things that don't really translate to packing theaters. That's not to say that this year's batch of films were poor. It's just that it does feel like there lacks a single narrative that's dominating the season that kind of makes it a little harder, a little less tangible for a lot of people.
Yeah, you're talking about packing theaters, and I've been reading how it seems like people are only going to theaters for kind of the big action films, like something like West Side Story, which really got, some really good award nods. That didn't really do so well in the theater, right? So what's that about? Yeah. Basically, I think people are really only going to the theaters for the four quadrant stuff, which nowadays is almost exclusively comic book adaptations, right? And so, and partly you can think, well, the people who can most or who have the least amount of perceived risk in a theater is young people, right? And so, Spider-Man, which does extraordinarily well among young men, that doesn't have an impact. Whereas musicals, honestly, I was never sure that West Side Story was going to do great in the theaters, because I think the people who were very confident of it were people who were alive when the original 1960 in the 1960s version came out. And so it doesn't really have the cachet. The musical doesn't really have the same amount of cultural cachet among younger generations. In fact, there are populations that have historically not been listened to that have always found this musical kind of problematic and didn't really find it beloved. And so, you just haven't seen, and also the fact that musicals tend, on average, demographically, they tend to be most popular among slightly older women, middle-aged and above. And those are the types of people who have not yet returned to the theaters. And so I think that that's what happened there. The film was undeniably exquisitely crafted. I mean, it's Steven Spielberg at his best, among his best work, regardless of whatever you think about the story, the spectacle of it is theater worthy, but still, is it worth risking a pandemic theater worthy? Very little is. So what are your favorites what are your forerunners, I guess, even though you just said there's not one that everybody's agreeing on, but which ones were you drawn to this season?
Yeah, so my favorite films, I should say here, and let me give this disclaimer. Here are the Best Picture nominees I have not yet seen. I have not yet seen Belfast. I just never got around to it. And I actually kind of want to, because I have a feeling that that kind of multi-generational family drama is something that I tend to resonate with. I'm always curious about cultures that I don't know much about. So the fact that it's about an Irish family, I'd like to get into that and see what resonates, particularly since I assume that Irish families in that era have a lot of connections to like some sort of faith tradition. So I'd like to see Belfast. I haven't gotten around to it yet. I haven't seen Dune. I've never read Dune, and it just seems really daunting. And I'm just one of those people where if you make an adaptation of like an enormous like sci-fi or fantasy tome that I haven't read, I don't know. I guess I
Did you ever see the original?
No, I don't know.
Did you ever see?
I don't know the first thing about Dune. I'm not actually ashamed to say that. It's fine. There's enough people who love Dune. Like, I just don't know the first thing about Dune, and so it just felt like very impenetrable to me. I haven't seen Dune, and I have not yet seen Nightmare Alley. Okay, so that said, I don't really have a strong favorite, like a film that really like knocked me off my feet in like the way that like in past years, say like Moonlight or Lady Bird or Get Out or Parasite did. But I personally, I think that Coda brought me the most pleasure and enjoyment. It's not what I would consider a traditional awards film because it's not angsty, or edgy.
It's almost like a YA coming of age rom-com even.
Yeah, it's a family. It's very much a family film, kind of in a similar way that King Richard actually felt extremely commercial to me. There's a version of the Williams family story that is much darker, but given that the Williams family was directly involved in this one, I'm not surprised that they kind of gave us this more like inspirational version instead, which was fine. But Coda I really loved. I in my own coverage earlier this year, I've shared that despite I don't have any deaf members of my family, but I found the code switching and the sort of linguistic barriers that the family in Coda dealt with to be very similar to the experiences that we have in like multilingual immigrant families. And that was so surprisingly poignant, right? Like I didn't expect to really be able to resonate with that parent-child relationship for like a white Massachusetts fishing family that deals with a disability, but I found a lot to relate to. So I enjoyed Coda the most. I would say I am actually one of those people who liked Don't Look Up. Like I kind of just felt like the satire was the only way to sum up the just the absurdity of our current climate, and it was extremely on the nose, but like I mean, given what we've lived through in the past 6 years, I think you just need to be really on the nose with your satire. So I liked Don't Look Up. I usually I'm not like a voter or anything like that, obviously, but I always play the game like if I was an Academy voter, I would pick my best picture based on what I think is the best time capsule film. Like what's the best film that if you sealed it in a time capsule and had to say this represented what this year was like for our society, our culture. And I feel like Don't Look Up is like obviously the 2021 like pandemic year, dystopian, like, class struggle movie. So I liked Don't Look Up, and I liked Power of the Dog too. I thought it was very beautiful. Like it's beautifully shot. The characters are so interesting. I found a lot of sympathy. I'm still kind of thinking about it because I actually saw that super recently, but I'm still really thinking about it. I thought that was a really it was for me at my level of sort of film literacy, it was just accessible enough for me to kind of have a lot to think about afterwards.
What about Drive My Car? Have you seen that one?
Yes. So I figured you were going to ask me about it because I wasn't going to offer it because I'll be very honest. Like, and this is where like my comment about my own film literacy comes in. I have sort of always found Murakami adaptations to be like somewhat impenetrable. And I recognize that like I'm in the minority when it comes to that. And, you know, when it comes to just other people who like my husband, like after we saw Drive My Car, my husband talked about it for like 45 minutes. And he really got a lot out of it. And he's a true, like, I would call him a true film connoisseur. So I'm not surprised that he really understood it. And I can it's very beautiful, very quiet, very subtle. And I don't know what it is about me. Like, I think very similar to when I saw Burning, which is another masterpiece, Murakami adaptation. I think it's just that maybe I'm too basic. Like, I know that's kind of a flippant way to describe it, but like, I feel like I don't yet possess the skills to really like see what everybody is seeing in it. Like, I can tell that it's sort of like just like knowing that this book is too deep for you. I don't know what another way to say it. The performances are extraordinary. They're very quiet. I mean, of course, it's Murakami, so all the performances are very quiet. Everything that happens it's like anti-action, right? It's like white space. It's what's unsaid. That's what's happening. And I just need to...
a lot of things that are said, but they're all metaphors for something else.
Yeah. It's basically like watching a very, very long adaptation of a short story. I mean, that's exactly what it is, right? And so it's reading short stories. And so... yeah. So I don't want to front and be like, I completely understood Drive My Car. Like, I didn't, but that's a me and Murakami thing. It's just like I recognize them as masters. I recognize them as masters. But I just need to like sort of beef up my skills for it.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten that Burning was also based on a Murakami, and I read Murakami, before these. Actually, I think some of these films actually had Burning had a previous iteration.
Burning is an adaptation of a Murakami adaptation of a Faulkner short story, which I've read both. I've read both of the Burning short stories as well, and they're all just kind of impenetrable. Like, again, it's been just such a long time. Like, I actually used to be like, I was an English major, and I truly wasn't always this. I keep saying basic. This is my sleep-addled brain. I can't think of another word for it. But I don't know. I feel like maybe I've just maybe it's been too many years since I've read, and so I've kind of lost that incision a little bit. But
well, I think that our tastes change over time too. You know, I think that like, I had access to so many of the Best Picture nominations, but I do not want to watch anything that has a bully. I don't know, like, I can't emotionally handle it, so I did not pick up Power of the Dog. I did not, anything that's going to be maybe a little bit violent or scary. I think during pandemic, my tastes have really gotten very narrow. It's like I want introspective and funny, uplifting films. Like, those are like the only things I can handle during this time. And same thing with books. Like, I've narrowed my books to kind of a very a lot of people saying that they can't read during the pandemic. It's just, I think emotionally, it's just been so hard to go through this time, and our consumption is shaped by, where we are in terms of our emotional and spiritual states.
I think that's really interesting, and I think you're probably right about that. Absolutely, people's tastes have changed as a result of our experiences during the pandemic, and I think that that's reflected too, right, in the the box office returns or the ratings or however like various studios measure consumption, I think that definitely is reflected.
You know, Drive My Car was also like, I saw the trailer and I thought it was a driving movie, and it was not at all. It was a complete shock to me watching it, that I had no idea what it was about. And it was completely like a meta, like play within a film that's really about their lives and your lives. They break the third wall. I mean, I was like, I think because of the surprise, I was like, I love this. I was like, I just, all the metaphors and all the kind of introspection was so unexpected. And because I've always loved Murakami, and it really was so classic Murakami. That I had forgotten how much it reminded me how much I loved Murakami. And so, I think I don't know, for me, it was definitely one of the best films that I've seen in a long time, but definitely impenetrable in so many ways if I think you're looking for something that is action driven or even plot driven.
Or even really. Like dialogue and like sort of character, like, or even sort of,
yeah.
Because I'm not a big action person either, but because... and again, the way that short stories are, the economy of exchanges, the fact that conversations are always about something else. And also these characters, like the protagonist in Drive My Car is a guy who keeps everything to himself. And so is the other, I'm totally blanking on their names, but the actor, the main character, is the director, as well as his driver, are both very internal. Like everybody's so internal, right?
Yes.
And so, I also
there is a mystery that unravels, but it's a very, very slow burn, and it's not like a mystery that you're like dying to know. It just so slowly reveals itself, and then it's. And it's not really shocking. It's just revelatory about kind of their internal processes, right? About what they've internalized, how they've dealt with grief, and how they've, just processed. And so I don't know. It felt like the ways that so to me, a movie is excellent when it reveals something about my own life. There was one scene. I don't think this is a spoiler where. The young woman is a driver, and he says to her, you're such a good driver. How are you such a good driver? And she reveals the reason coming out of kind of an abusive situation, and that because of that abusive situation with her mother, that she's such an amazing driver. And she says it very matter-of-factly. And it made me think about all the kind of abuses that I've endured, the kind of like traumas, and how that's formed, the person that I am. And I was just like blown away by that revelation. I don't know. There was something about it when I just felt like my life view had changed in that moment. And so, those movies don't come along very, very often. And I feel like I think Moonlight was another film like that. There was just these moments, or even like movies like Minari and The Farewell were movies like that for me, revealing things about like my immigrant past, because I haven't seen anything, that actually talked about those stories. But in this case, this was kind of so very kind of universal, right? But I think the fact that they were Asian faces helped me to relate more to it and be open. Yeah.
So I want to say two things in response to that. One is, I think you absolutely nailed it, that it's a mystery that isn't about like what happened back there, like what's the twist. It's the kind of mystery where it's just about the mystery of yourself. It's revelation, it's self-revelation. So Nishijima and Miura, both of their characters, basically by the end, and again, I'll sort of elide the spoiler, the plots, whatever plot there is that exists in Drive My Car. But what they both discover about their characters, and the sort of the chronic passivity, and the guilt they have from their passivity, like that common ground, like that's very interesting, right? And that's extraordinarily universally, potentially relatable to people. And again, it kind of but that kind of payoff has to do with an audience's own appetite for that kind of self-examination. So, but yeah, I mean, that movie is, it is rare. Again, films rarely are that subtle and holding up a mirror to ourselves. But the other thing I wanted to say when you talked about the Asian faces is what I thought was really cool that I actually really haven't seen in any other film, Asian or Asian American, is the multi-ethnic Asianness of it, because what's cool about Nishijima's character is that he specializes in like basically putting on these like multilingual, language agnostic adaptations of like classic Western plays like Chekhov or Beckett and things like that. And so this production of Uncle Vanya is in Japanese, English, I think, Korean, and Korean Sign Language, which was so
and Tagalog
cool.
and Mandarin.
Thank you. Yes, that's right. Tagalog and Mandarin. And so all of those languages are spoken natively, by respective members of the cast. And that was really cool. Like I'm curious to I would be curious to know like why the director Hamaguchi sort of made that decision to do that. I assume it's not from the original short story. And also, by the way, Nancy, if you need a refresher, and I haven't read the original texts, but Drive My Car, the movie, is basically like that screenplay, that adapted screenplay nomination is very well deserved because that screenplay is actually cobbled together from an entire collection of Murakami short stories, one of which is called Drive My Car. But there are elements of the film that are taken from separate short stories within that collection.
Yes,
and it weaves them together.
Because I don't think I read Drive My Car, but when the movie first starts, which is like a kind of a first act that really has nothing to it
takes 40 minutes. It takes 40 minutes before the movie starts.
Yes, but those 40 minutes, like everything she was saying, I was like, I read that story. Like the everything they were saying,
dialogue,
all the stories.
Right? Yeah.
Yes, which is her telling a story that sounded like a Murakami story, because I was like listening to it and it was so familiar to me, and I thought, but I didn't read Drive My Car, so now that makes sense that they cobbled it together from other Murakami, because it was so many things that were unexpected with the movie that I think I haven't been surprised by a movie like that in so long. Like when the credits started 40 minutes into the movie and you realize that's the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, that's the
what
setup.
was I watching? What was I watching for 40 minutes? And then because the trailer, this is not a spoiler, like there's there's a passing of, a family member, and then it's like 40 minutes of this family member talking, and I thought, what is going on? Did I misread the trailer? So this is where, because American trailers, Hollywood trailers are the worst. They pretty much now give away everything, and there's no reason to even watch movies because the trailer pretty much is the plot and everything, right? So here now we have a trailer that confused and completely like side railed me, because I was expecting a buddy like road trip movie. It's called Drive My Car. And there's very little. There's driving and there's some road tripping, but that's actually a minority of the movie.
Can you imagine?
The majority is this other thing.
I mean, can you imagine though what an accurate trailer of Drive My Car would even look like? Like, I just don't know. Like, I think it would be like 10 minutes of silent driving and then, the titles.
Well, it would be maybe the play a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if the play was even in the trailer. And the driving significance is really about the play too, in so many ways. I don't know. It's such a fascinating film that I think that American, audiences may find impenetrable, but I feel like, I don't know, I think it's cool because I think a Japanese movie looks different from, maybe a South Korean movie, different from like there's specificities, right, in I think the culture that gets infused, and the Murakami of it is very specific. Not that all Japanese movies are like this, certainly not,
Yeah.
Just like not all Korean movies are not Bong Joon-ho, so.
Yeah, I think that the genre of it, like this is much more similar to Lee Chan-dong's Burning than to Bong Joon-ho's Parasite, and to Koreeda's Shoplifters, right? Like, which is a Japanese film. Like, it's really
that was different too.
It's really the genre, yeah. Like, and again, the really cool thing about Drive My Car is that it is a Japanese film, but there are a good number of non-Japanese characters or like cross-cultural characters, right? Like Koreans living in Japan and things like that, inhabiting the world. So and it's honestly like, and again, I think I wouldn't have the same expectations for it during award seasons as Parasite. People may be like, oh wow, Asian films are big now. They're like 1,000% different films. Parasite is wildly accessible, right? Like by genre, Parasite is I'm not surprised that Parasite was a phenomenon, because that movie is extremely accessible to all. This film is the opposite. But I have a lot of faith that, again, people with like tastes that are more refined than mine, people with Nancy's and like the critics, because the critics' consensus across the country has been Drive My Car, right? It's the LA, I think they got both the New York Film Critics Circle and the LA Film Critics Best Picture win. I could be wrong about that, but
it's a 3-hour film too.
It's a 3-hour Murakami adaptation. So I do recommend for people to, like, honestly, these things are good for, like, I'm glad I watched it because I want to challenge my tastes, and my understanding of things. So again, by no means, I'm not saying that I didn't like the movie. What I'm saying is, like, it's like I lack the facility to fully appreciate it, but I want to get there.
Hey everybody, producer Richard Clark here. I just wanted to let you know that The Disruptors host, Esau McCauley, is the guest of the January 18th episode of Every Voice Now, InterVarsity Press's other podcast. Every week, Mila Kim and Ed Gilbreth showcase the stories of how authors of color manage to write and publish their books. And just to give you a sense of what to expect, here's a clip.
You're New York Times columnist. You've been in the Washington Post. CT, of course, and now a best-selling book. How did we get here? It's amazing.
That is a good question. I'm glad you asked this question. I can say a couple of things. One is I was a much worse writer when I tried to write like other people. And so I was like, okay, let me do the Academy the way the Academy tells me to do the Academy. And I just wasn't very good at being a stereotypical white academic.
You can subscribe now to Every Voice Now, anywhere you get your podcast.
This is the third year that we have an Asian director nominated for Best Director. Like, that has just not happened, And the last two, Bong Joon-ho and Chloe Zhao, both won Best Director. So, and it's like, I feel like it's so like pan East Asian. You have the Japan, you have the Korean director, the Chinese director, and now we have the Japanese director. And this is also the first time a Japanese film has been so honored at the Academy Awards, right? So there's all sorts of firsts here, and I think that this is exciting for Asian cinema.
It's super exciting, and it is very revealing of how sometimes these drives, like, I do think that that's a direct result of the A2020 initiative, which is the Academy's initiative to expand its membership and like hugely they hugely diversified their membership by expanding it, right? Like, it exponentially grew. And a lot of that was from inviting more international members, which have brought a new sensibility. And so it's amazing that Drive My Car got nominated for Best Picture, as well as a number of other categories that weren't just international feature film. I feel like if this had happened a few years earlier, we would have seen Shoplifters, in that Best Picture race.
Yes, that was such a good film.
A great film. And so, much more like sort of accessible.
Yes.
But
and like, it's got kids, and it's got it's very, and it's got the class difference and a lot of sympathies. I mean, it's very similar kind of themes to what Parasite is trying to do in terms of critiquing kind of the class divisions and exploitation and the victims and all of that. So yeah, I mean, so Rebecca, you bring up the Academy, and so the Academy, I think it was, when Oscars So White was the hashtag was trending because there were no actors of color nominated for
2015 and 2016. Yep.
That's right. So no actors of color in any of the 20 slots, 4 categories. And LA Times had done an expose on the demographics of the Academy, and it was predominantly, white, over the age of 60, and male. And that's when, they felt pressured because of the kind of overwhelming public disfavor of that, to actually open up and, like you said, start that initiative. And now we are seeing a lot of the results of having a more diverse and inclusive, but still not yet, I think, matching the U.S. population by any means, but still it's, we're seeing definitely at least more awareness of these films, right? Especially the international films.
Yeah, I think that you're seeing more awareness. You're seeing them just at least get a little bit more consideration. But at the end of the day, the Academy is the very last link of the pipeline, of the cinematic pipeline that begins with, what projects, what scripts get developed, and what gets greenlit into production, and how much of a distribution they get. And I feel like you can kind of see, and again, like we still don't have enough data, like there hasn't been enough years to be able to to definitively say like, oh, we're definitely better. Like I always feel that we're one award cycle away from a hashtag So White again situation. Happened with the Emmys this past year. Like these last Emmys, like literally everybody who won an acting Emmy was white in 2021. And so we're not like completely out of the woods, but I do think that you can certainly see that these, that trickle down effect is slowly happening in terms of people really giving like a wider aperture to what could be considered an awards film. However, you can also see then, as a result of what sort of like ends up downstream, what's still missing. And so like one category that has historically and continuously been lacking and is like still very, very white is lead actress. And I don't think that's by accident. That is not by accident. Because if you think about the fact that like when you look at underrepresented populations, like women and like people from the global majority, then that Venn diagram of that is that women from the global majority are always like get the tiniest sliver, and when they do, they're getting supporting roles. And so that lead actress race, more so even than lead actor, I believe, is going to be the one that is going to struggle the most year after year, and that is exactly what happened this year. We have let me see, Will Smith and Denzel Washington nominated in lead actor. Supporting actor, I think, is all white, although Troy Kotsur, who gave an incredible, very deserving performance in Coda, is deaf. And then supporting actress is Ariana DeBose and Ingenue Ellis, which is incredible. But all 5 Best Actress nominees are white, as they often are every year.
So yeah, every year. That one hasn't budged. And I really appreciate what you said, because that's so true, because the lead actress is a very important role. And we haven't had an Asian American woman ever win lead actress, only supporting. And the only nominee historically was, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on her name, but she was a South Asian actress in the very, very classic movies. And
Merle Oberon?
Merle Oberon.
Yeah, there's a book, right? There is somebody just got a book. It was in Publishers Marketplace. Somebody's doing a biography of Merle Oberon.
Oh,
a
great!
South Asian
Yeah, because
writer.
she was hiding her Asian ethnicity, and that was how she was probably able to get a Best Actress nomination. She didn't win, but that was our closest, I think, candidate for Best Actress.
I mean, there's white ladies who've won Oscars for playing Asians, though.
Yes, yes, we have more white ladies. That's right. That's right. We have Louise Rayner who played Olan for The Good Earth, who that role should have gone to Anna May Wong.
Yeah.
And
Linda, what's her name?
Yes.
For playing a boy, for playing Billy Kwan.
Yes, in A Year of Living Dangerously.
Yeah.
So,
great.
I know. And Rebecca, you've done a lot to advocate for women of color in Hollywood. Can you tell us a little bit about like the work that you've done that you've been most proud of?
Oh gosh. I can give you one example of something that I'd like to, like the kind of spirit of things that I'd like to do more of is a couple of years ago, I found out about, one of sort of my social media, like network, acquaintances, LaToya Morgan, an amazing TV writer. I met her through Jeff Yang, and so we started following each other on social media. And she had posted this like Instagram photo of what kind of just looked like an informal retreat of herself with several dozen Black women who were all TV writers. And I was just like, that's really cool. Like that's just that like. Do you guys have like an informal collective, just like a support group and of a network? And I asked her, for her permission to kind of do some sort of story about the group. And I asked her not just like, can we do a story, but are you okay with me doing the story? Do you want me to find a Black woman writer? And at the time, shamefully, Hollywood Reporter had no Black women on staff in an editorial position. But she was like, no, this is great. Go ahead and do the story. And so what we ended up doing is we did, we assembled a photo shoot, and it was the Hollywood Reporter's largest photo shoot that we had done. And this was like 2019, I want to say, 2018, 2019. It was like 65 women. We did a photo shoot with them, which was cool. And the headline was very blunt. It was great. I think my editor at the time came up with it and just said like, no more, quote, we can't find any Black women writers. Here are 65 in one photo. And then for the text, what I decided to do was, instead of doing a write through, I gave everybody a questionnaire. I was like, so 65, oh no, there was more because there was women who didn't make it to the photo shoot, but everybody who kind of got back to me, I gave them a questionnaire. I just asked like, just everything, like your experiences, like how did you get into the business? What do you feel are the biggest obstacles in the pipeline? What would you like people, what are people getting wrong about what it's like to be a Black woman, in TV? What do you want people, like, what's that one takeaway you want people to have? And then I just decided to like run. So in print, which is always like, excerpted, I made sure that every single woman who responded had at least one response, reprinted in the magazine. And then online, I ran all of them in full. It was an enormous endeavor to edit nearly 70 interviews. But I was like, this, it would be the most hypocritical thing in the world for me to sort of just repurpose their words and kind of just paraphrase and be like, this is what a lot of them said. And I just was like, no, when we say listen to Black women, we have to listen to them and really, reprint their words verbatim. And then I went in and I added all of their reps, online, just so that people like, just to really like make it as few excuses and as few barriers as possible for people to reach out to these women, and to show the power of a system and a network, that was built by this group was founded by Lena Waithe, Erica Johnson, and Akechi Okoro Carroll, and they just like it's just blossomed from there, and it's been going on for many years, and a lot of the women have actually been able to rise up in the TV ranks, which is very significant, because one problem that faces TV writers of color is that they just end up on that entry-level staff writer carousel like 4 or 5 times, which is unconscionable. But they've been rising. I've been seeing them get development deals in the trades. But anyway, so I'm proud of that because of the process of just really thinking like, what is the actual point of doing this? It's to really be able to hear from them directly. It's really to lower, what can we do editorially to lower the barriers, right? To not just in content, but in sort of how we're presenting this information. However, there's a lot of room for improvement. I received valuable feedback from some of the women who were in the shoot who said, great idea, but when we walked into that photo shoot, there were no Black people on your photo crew. We didn't have any like Black hair and makeup artists, so we had to go get ourselves styled. With that many people, we would have told them to get themselves kind of camera ready anyway, but we did have hair makeup on hand for touch-ups, but they weren't Black. And, and again, like, even if it was quote unquote hard to find, I think that if I could do it differently, I would have really pushed for that, would have pushed for like lighting, photographer. They all did it. They did a wonderful job, but again, like really meaning what you say and meaning what your intent is. And also, I think that thankfully now I would say that I wouldn't have written the piece because we do have Black women on staff. A few, not enough. But I want to do more things like that.
So I know that when I first announced I was hosting the Disruptors, and then I put out the guest list like Jean Lewin Yang, Min Jin Lee, you tweeted back, all these folks share the faith. This subject matter has been one of the underlying questions in my life, and I feel like I haven't given enough space to working it out. So what a valuable forum for discussion. So tell me more about what was going through your mind when, I said, hey, I want to talk about faith and culture making.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you are asking me this, because I just feel that like in my work life and sort of this increasingly like whatever like public forum that I have, like I'm always very candid, online, and it's, this, everything I tweet or everything I write about publicly is how I really feel about something. But like just this enormously important part of my life, which is my faith, my Christian faith, never has come up in my work. It's never come up. And like in what I tweet about, most of which is about politics and or representation, it just doesn't come up. It's like, it's a complete, it's kind of like, and I find it disconcerting too, that what I see the public narrative of people who are sort of self-described Christians like I am, is that they're often taking the completely opposite, like, set of values or beliefs, which is a generalization, because actually, in the past year or so, some of my favorite new Twitter follows is I've somehow like been lucky enough to, you tap in, like you start following one account and then you see who they're reading. And so I've added quite a few accounts that I follow on Twitter now, Christians who are really on the front lines of housing justice, economic justice, social justice in different ways, that really challenge, in some ways, really, really, really challenge how I am putting my faith into action in my daily work, as well as just giving me a lot of hope that this is the gospel of Christ carried out quietly, painstakingly uphill every day I really crave more of that conversation. I feel like there's a very clear delineation. There's like a separation between like my work life, like sort of like, oh, Rebecca, the journalist at THR, and like everything about my personal life, which has since I grew up, I'm a PK. I've grown up in the church and I've stayed in the church. Although I've had various, I would say, developments. I'm a PK, which means like I'm pretty jaded. Like you can't shock me with, like, I've seen every hypocritical thing that could possibly happen. So I've been through it, and I've stayed in it or come back to it. And it's an enormously important part of my life. It's an enormously important part of the way in which I interact with my family, with my closest friends who are believers, in my marriage. And yet it doesn't really touch my professional life, which is a growing part of my life. So that bums me out. So I'm thankful for this, honestly.
Yeah, and I would argue, so this is something that I've been actually tackling with a lot of the guests about, how do we meld our faith and justice work and, professional work and culture making. And I think that, I would argue that I think you are living out your faith in your profession, right? You don't have to necessarily say, now I'm going to pray for you and read the Bible.
There's no
you.
JPM, Jesus per minute word count, right?
I mean, because you don't necessarily. I mean, you may not legally be able to do that in the workplace, or it's not necessarily welcome in that form, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that when I talk to Olivia Leong, she talks about as an actor being on set and just creating a warm, welcoming, loving set, that is safe for everybody there, and that's and through her storytelling, and because she took like some sort of spiritual gifts test. And she got evangelism as the highest, and she's like, "Oh no!" but she realized that evangelism, storytelling is a form of evangelism, right?
Absolutely.
And that because as an actor, she's telling stories, and through the way that she, acts and lovingly and with compassion with people around her. When often, as you and I both know, Hollywood can be a very toxic place. That she is a witness and a salt and light in that space, right? Which I know you are in every space that I've ever met you in and seen you in. And so I think that, I myself, I have been accused that because I don't put Christian in my bio or something in my Twitter bio, that somehow I'm not, I'm hiding myself. But I'm not, because I feel like, I am earning the right to enter into spaces with people who may or may not understand if I put like, John 3:16 or something in my Twitter bio. But through my actions and through my, when I reach out to people, I am hopefully doing the work of God and transmitting the love of Christ in the way that I can. And so it doesn't have to necessarily be kind of overt intersections, because we are whole, right? We are whole people in Christ in whatever setting we're in. And it doesn't have to necessarily look a certain way for it to be holistic in ourselves. So
I appreciate that very much. And what's interesting is I feel like nowadays the way in which it applies the most, like you're right, it's never in certain, like I think back when we were not all working remotely, I occasionally had like what I found were such precious conversations with coworkers, right? Who would find out like, oh my gosh, are you like, your dad's a pastor? Wait, are you still a Christian? I have so many questions for you, right? And then they'd ask, like the really tough ones. But I found it so valuable, because I really appreciate when other people initiate those conversations with me, because it's just not natural for me to like, I did the whole like college, like, hello, do you know God personally?
Yep, me too.
Right. Yeah. We did all that. But But nowadays,
those were never very effective.
They're not effective.
Like,
I had a 0% batting average on spring break. But where I find my faith most challenged, to put into action nowadays, because nowadays most of our interactions are all on social media, is really curbing that instinct to like clap back and just like really watching my words. And I haven't always been good at that. And I'm really trying. And one thing, like, so I did a terrible job of reading my Bible all of 2021, like just the world's worst job, like backslid, terrible. So far, it's only like, February, but as well, we're recording this at least. I started like a Bible plan, a very ambitious Bible reading plan that was like the whole Bible in a year. So it's like multiple chapters a day. And the opening prayer with the devotional every day is, God help me increase in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And then the second line item on the prayer is, God, let any knowledge I gain be used to love you and others more and not to puff myself up. And I really love that. I really love that daily exhortation and reminder, because it is so tempting. I really, really want to use everything I learned to like, just like get people, and to not to not do that, and to realize that the knowledge you acquire is to be used in service of others and in service of the Lord, is really challenging for me, but a challenge that I really want to take on. So, yeah, and you're right. Like, that has nothing to do with how declarative, which, let's be honest, oftentimes performative it is. To have like and it's also really bad. Like nowadays, and I know I'm not alone in this sentiment. Like, if you see somebody who's like with the word Christian in their Twitter bio, you're probably in for a host of like really terrible takes. And that's very shameful. But I also I really, really want, like, it's like one of those things where like the perverse part of me like would love for somebody to like challenge, like I would love for somebody to assume that like my faith isn't real and that I don't know anything about the Bible. Like, step up, man. Step up. I've been reading this thing since I learned how to read, so okay, that's a direct conflict with the prayer I just mentioned, but it's a process.
No.
It's a process.
I think it's good to be proud of that the Bible. That's not necessarily a puffing up. Is it wrong to say like I'm proud that I've been a Christian for so long?
You're right. We should be proud. And honestly, I think that that's why I really love your podcast and this series, because it really shows that there are engaged people who are both engaged with their faith and engaged with the culture. Because I think it is important to be the latter as part of your journey in the former. And again, everybody's called to different stations of life. But you must know and love people. Yeah. You must know people in order to love people, I think.
So, Rebecca, at the end of the podcast, I always ask our guests, what are you reading, watching, listening to that you want to share with listeners that, are disruptive in a good way?
I'll say that Pachinko is about to come out, and read the book. Read the novel, Min-Jin Lee's novel.
Yes.
Obviously, you've had her.
Min-Jin Lee is a previous guest.
Yes, exactly. You've had her on the podcast. And it was amazing, too, because I didn't know she was a Christian. And then I realized, because the novel has such beautiful, explanations and illustrations of God's grace.
Yes.
And so, of course, she has familiarity with it in order to write about it. But the series is very different. It's completely different in construct and format and structure. But again, I think building off of Minjin's incredible premise is something unlike any Hollywood series that has ever existed. And again,
oh wow,
because of its positioning as, this is a U.S. produced series, but dealing with multinational, multilingual, cross-cultural, colonial, like various different forces. Like I can't think of a different country that could be able to handle all of that other than a Korean diasporic artistic community. So that's quite disruptive. I also saw Michelle Yeoh's new movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Very disruptive. Like the format of it is just like, it's a rule breaker. If you've seen the Daniels previous film, which stars Daniel Radcliffe as a bloated corpse, then it just gives you an idea of the imagination of these guys. So it's a crazy movie. It's like a Stephen Chow movie, but mixed with like this very strong emotionality of the story of a family, and especially of this Asian immigrant woman who made choices in her life that led to this point, which was very, very poignant. I was shocked that this movie exists and that it was made by the Daniels, like within it. So those two things are very, very disruptive, and I saw them recently, and soon everybody will also get a chance to.
I want to see them so badly, Rebecca. I'm like waiting. I've been waiting. I'm literally on a list, and I haven't seen them yet. So I can't wait. Thank you so much for coming on The Disruptors, and you are our final kind of bonus episode guest of the season. So just so thankful to be able to have this conversation with you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Nancy, just for, providing a place for this and just for including me at this table. And like I said, this is a conversation I rarely get to have, but I thirst for. I really, really seek it out. I don't have enough people who intersect.
We need a Christians in Hollywood group.
I'm sure that there is one, but like not one that I want to be a part of. But like, but yes, actually, the kind like the sort of disruptors gang. I would really like that. I really think it would feed my soul, especially again during the pandemic. Like I've become more isolated. Like, and so I actually talk to, in some cases, like work related folks more often than like my church friends who I haven't seen in like a year, because everybody had babies. And so like I really, really crave that fellowship.